Right, Sherwin Peace joins us now from New York as the clock is ticking, and there's of course absolutely no telling at this stage who will emerge victorious. As we take you live now to Sherwin, welcome. Where would you say the nominees are spending their time in these closing stages of the race, and what does that tell us about the state of this race one day from Election Day?
Paul, it's actually quite an exciting moment to have reached this week, right? Only if people were not so anxious about the outcome here. What is very clear about what will happen by the time we know the outcome of this election result is that 50% of the country is going to be devastated and 50% of the country is going to be over the moon. And how that plays itself out is also going to be something very interesting to watch. But for now, it's all about the swing states. Donald Trump visiting North Carolina, visiting Pennsylvania, and making a final stop in Michigan today, while Kamala Harris, after spending the weekend both in North Carolina and Michigan, will spend her entire day making 4 stops in just the state of Pennsylvania. And why are they there? Well, the latest polling from the Siena College and New York Times poll out this weekend tells us this. North Carolina, Harris leading 48-46. In Pennsylvania, a dead heat, 48%, 48%. In Michigan, a dead heat, 47% and 47%. So that slither of voter called the undecided voter that could go left and could go right is very much the focus of both these principals, very much the focus of both their campaigns, and they're really trying in these last moments to create enthusiasm, to create momentum, to create some energy around their candidature, and hoping that that will get them over the finish line, right? This is not about the popular vote. This is not about winning the majority of voters in the United States writ large. It's very much a focus on winning the Electoral College, and these purple states that sometimes go red and sometimes go blue are where the game is at. They have to win as many swing states as possible to get to 270 votes so that they win the Electoral College, and that gives them the keys to the White House and the Oval Office.
Both campaigns are claiming that they will win this election. So outside of the polling, which shows a close race, what's the sentiment on the ground in terms of how this might play out? More so, Sherwin, as we've seen on one end, Kamala Harris getting a lot of celebrities backing her up, Elon Musk for Donald Trump. How should we interpret that?
Yeah, lots of celebrities showing up for the candidates. I would say more certainly for the Democratic candidates. Certainly some big names like Taylor Swift, Beyonce, Harrison Ford, Robert De Niro and the like coming out in support of Kamala Harris here. And Donald Trump also having a few celebrities, among them Elon Musk, the South African-born billionaire, rocker Kid Rock, and a few others. But that's not where the focus will be, right? The focus is very much on turning out the demographics that are going to turning out your base. If you are Kamala Harris, you want women to show up here. If you are Donald Trump, you want men to show up here, because it's that's where the differences are going to lie. And the question really, I think, speaks to not what the candidates are saying, right? Both are saying they're going to win. It's very much understanding what the tea leaves are saying. What is the mood on the ground? And this is what we're learning at this late stage. In terms of early voting, some 73+ million Americans have already voted. But the split is like this. 54% are women that have voted so far, and 44% are men. That is indicative of where we might go here, and that looks like good news for someone like Kamala Harris. Given the fact that reproductive rights are on the ballot, given the fact that access to abortion, access to IVF is on the ballot, yes, and there are other issues, right? The economy, immigration, and all of that. But what we are seeing is a trend line here that says women are so far turning up in this election. Will that continue into Election Day? Could men show up for in-person voting tomorrow en masse? That could sort of equalize the numbers here. That remains to be seen, but it certainly gives the Harris campaign some momentum going into Election Day here. What we have also talked about over the last couple of weeks are the markets. The betting markets have basically built in that Donald Trump was going to win this election. That was certainly the sentiment from the betting markets last week. Almost at 70% was the level of confidence that Donald Trump was going to win. Those numbers are free falling right now. We are seeing some momentum for Harris here. And in terms of the betting markets, which is not a scientific evaluation, it's about sentiment, right? And the sentiment right now is that Harris is pushing up in terms of her prospects of winning this election, so much so that she is leading on one of the betting platforms or drawing near even with her prospects for winning this election, equal to that of Donald Trump. In addition to that, we had a poll come out of Iowa, the state of Iowa, over the weekend from the very reputable pollster, Gold Standard pollster. Her name is J.Ann Seltzer. She does this poll for the Des Moines Register, which is one of the big papers in the state of Iowa. And what it showed was that women in the last moments here of this election cycle are breaking for Kamala Harris, to the point that Kamala Harris yesterday, on Sunday when this poll dropped, was leading Donald Trump in the state of Iowa by about 3 to 4 points within the margin of error. But for a state that went Republican both in 2016, voted for Donald Trump again in 2020, this could be indicative, given the nature, the quality of this poll, right? It's a gold standard poll. It could be indicative of the women, the female turnout in some of those neighboring swing states, right? Iowa is right there near Ohio, right near Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Will you see those numbers reflect in some of the swing states? That is certainly some of the sentiment we are seeing here. So it does certainly bode well in terms of the female vote breaking for Harris here, given that the female demographic in a U.S. election is the largest demographic in a U.S. election. So women could have a very powerful role come the time when we tabulate results here.
And this is a very diverse electorate. Who will cast ballots for different reasons? What are the top issues in this election cycle, and how does that inform us about a potential result?
And Paul, there's a guy called James Carville. You might have seen him on CNN a few times. He used to be a strategic advisor to former Democratic President Bill Clinton when he was running against George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush's father, in the 1992 election. And he made a very famous quote that rings true even today. He said, "It's about the economy, stupid." So the economy is the top issue in the United States. The cost of living issue has been a very pertinent one, particularly in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen inflation at very, very high levels. That now has come down to what the Federal Reserve would like to see at around 2%. It is currently at 2.1%. We are seeing inflation coming down. There's another Fed rate cut expected later this week. So the economy is improving, but it's still not being felt in people's personal pocketbooks so far. The immigration issue, right? Illegal immigration into the United States, fortifying the border, particularly at the southern border with Mexico, has been a big issue for the Trump campaign here. On the Harris side, the big issues are reproductive rights, access to IVF, access to abortion, right? Following that Supreme Court ruling in 2022 that essentially undercut the federal right to abortion, which had been around in the United States for some 50 years, so undercutting a 50-year precedent. Issues of healthcare, but issues also central to saving America's democracy are very much the purview of the Harris campaign. It's certainly what they're pushing against. They believe Trump is a threat to democracy. But we also managed to get some of the views of voters out there, voters writ large across these United States. This is what they had to say. Let's watch.
I wait for it to be done with. It's a little overwhelming, so we all the commercials and bad publicity just doesn't sit right with me, but it'll be done soon, so we'll see what happens.
I think whoever wins was going to be chaotic. I don't feel that either party or either person represents all of us equally, and that never happens, but it is what it is, and I just see there'll be chaos. I think there's going to be people challenged to vote, and people my age don't want it. We want calm. We want things happening. You know, if you said you're going to do something, do it.
I'm worried. I hope the fix isn't in. I hope that we're able to take and have an honest, good election, a fair election, and I hope Trump wins it.
If she it's exciting for, what's to come, because the change is happening in America, because we're a diverse country. So, that would be a fresh face, for young girls to look up to.
Everything doubled in prices, food, insurance, utilities, you name it, everything's doubled. So the migrants, it's horrible too. You know, people are coming in illegally and just, you know, it's not just my opinion, a lot of people. So, what else? You know, it's just to feel like the country is not as strong as it used to be.
Right now on the national stage is consistent with who she was as DA in San Francisco, as Attorney General of California, and ultimately Senator from California. You know, but she's law enforcement background, pragmatic.
There's also a lot of hope, and I think she brought a lot of joy to the campaign that was very much appreciated, and people are very enthusiastic about her and about what she can do for the country.
So, for a multitude of views, they're a diverse electorate, but here's a number you might not have heard. The estimates around what this election might cost, right? You heard some of the voters there talking about being bombarded by adverts and commercials. That is happening across the swing states in particular, day in and day out. You know, one party or the other campaign seeking to convince people why they should vote for their candidate. And the number I want to give you is that this election is going to cost some $15 billion, around 220 billion rand, because it's not just the U.S. presidential election at play here. There is control of the House of Representatives. All 435 members of the House of Representatives are on the ballot this election cycle, and about a third of the Senate. So U.S. elections cost a lot of money. A lot of money. 15 billion. There's a number.
Yeah, that's a massive amount of money. How early could we expect an election result, and what might infirm an early call, or one that perhaps comes days later?
So what informs an early call is that the polls were completely wrong. One candidate, one nominee does far better on the night than the other candidate and wins all the early swing states. Maybe they surprise in Georgia, maybe they surprise in North Carolina. Those are two East Coast states that are likely to come in early. We might then have to wait for Pennsylvania, where the ballot counting is a different process. Wisconsin and Michigan use electronic balloting, so we expect the returns to come in quite quickly. But if the numbers are very tight going into the night, right, if it's a neck-and-neck race, that will take longer. That might push us into Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, maybe Thursday. Remember the last election during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, we only got a final result on the Saturday after the Tuesday election because a lot of mail-in ballots had to be processed, and you know, people just were not used to those kinds of volumes given the pandemic. We have a different situation right now, but if it is as close as the polls indicate, we might be at this for a few days. But then again, I like to focus on the margin of error in these polls. The margin of error is often between 2 to 5 points in a neck-and-neck, 48% in the state of Pennsylvania, for example. You have a margin of error built in there. Who does the margin of error favor? Does it favor Kamala Harris or does it favor Donald Trump? And can that be consistent across all the swing states? We don't have the answer to that yet. Does the margin of error favor Donald Trump? And can he sweep the board? That could make it an early night on election night. That doesn't seem to be the case in terms of what the polls are saying, but I wouldn't rule out a surprise come election night.
I suppose we'll just have to wait and see. Sherwin Bryce-Peace, live from New York. Thank you very much. Of course, giving us an idea, full picture on some of the expectations as the build-up to the U.S. election gets underway.